Eskom has suspended load shedding, but some parts of Johannesburg have not had power for 12 days after a substation caught fire. City Power says most of the areas have electricity again, but residents are counting the costs of the extra long outage. Newzroom Afrika's Katleho Sekhotho is an observatory and joins us now. Katleho, you are at the center of the big problem, essentially the observatory substation, which has disrupted people's lives. What's happening on the ground there?
Certainly, Mpo, we're outside the observatory substation where the fire here, gutted this, infrastructure, leaving people without power for up to 12 days. Now, what we know from City Power is that a number of areas have had their power restored, but there are a few pockets where it seems there's still a struggle. And, earlier on we spoke to the business there, the Observatory Golf Club there, just outlining, for example, how they have been unable to run operations as per usual. In some instances, people having to throw away food that has gone off and just not being able to run their lives as normal. But I want to bring into the conversation the ward councillor of Ward 66, Carlos Darocha, to just speak to us about, as a ward councillor, what you observed in terms of this fire that happened and the results, the consequences of it. Just take us briefly through what's been happening here.
Katleho, okay. 2 Saturdays ago in the morning, I started getting messages that the substation was on fire. And of course, one has to get up and come see what the story is. So basically, this is the control room of the substation. Now, the substation supplies power to a whole lot of other substations, like, for instance, the Bellevue substation, which is in turn provides power to most of Observatory, Bellevue, even as far as Houghton and Ridge, the top section of Observatory. And obviously, when this thing went, when it caught fire, the power went out. Yeah. And it went out to at least 4 or 5 wards that I know of, because this supplies quite a few wards. And it was pandemonium, so what happened, City Power got wind of the situation and they mobilized very quickly. So behind me is the caravan park and City Power actually came here, and when they assessed the situation, they waited for the fire to be put out by the fire brigades. And the minute they managed to clear the smoke and all the dangerous stuff, they assessed the situation and they built up a base camp here. That's City Power. So now, I've been a council for 13 years, and I must be honest with you, in City Power's defense in this case, they have threw so much manpower into this situation. When they assessed that this thing was quite serious, they actually, all management of City Power that I can think of were here. Yep. And they were here until the power was restored. Now, the thing was, obviously, being a councillor, the first question I'm going to ask, how long are the people going to be off? So the City Power guys said, look, we're looking at 4, 5, maybe 6 days, but to be on the safe side, we're going to make it 7 days power outage. So I said, okay, fine, I will send out to the residents. And the residents, who obviously nobody was happy, but, under the circumstances, it is what it is. It's a breakdown. And the residents knew that they were going to be out for 7 days. Yeah. So that was basically the ETR that the residents asked me for. I gave them the 7 days thing. So now the cause of the problem, I don't think City Power really knows what the cause of the problem was, but there are some dynamics, between this substation and Bellevue substation. And they've got an 88 kVA cable running from here to Bellevue. That's from here is about 3 kilometers. And that is it's a very old cable. And that cable, the actual core, which is a copper core, is encased in oil that acts as a coolant. Now, that cable was also faulty. So, according to City Power, to get that cable repaired was going to take 2 to 3 weeks. So City Power, they didn't feel that the residents would be able to be without power for 3 weeks. So what they did, behind me, you can see all this excavation here. they ran a separate line from here to Bellevue substation. So in other words, they bypassed the damaged cable and they put new lines to power up the Bellevue substation.
Right.
And they still, and of course they carried on repairing the broken cable.
That's why it went up to 12 days.
No. So I'll get there. So obviously this particular cable, they have to drain the oil, clean the system, and then, you know, after fixing the joint, and then they have to fill it with oil again, and test. They can't have bubbles. It's very intricate, sorry. So anyway, they finished the laying of the cable between here to Bellevue within the time frame. So they started reinstating power to Brazilian Valley, Kensington and surrounds within 5 and 6 days. So they were 2 days ahead of schedule, which was very good. But then the substation in Bellevue became a problem because every time they put the power up, it was such a big overload that it would trip everything. So they couldn't just switch the power on. So obviously it took much longer to reinstate Bellevue. So they were a day late in the Bellevue reinstatement schedule. So eventually they started getting the Bellevue station powered up. You need to understand that in a network like this, if the power stays off for too long, and they try and switch it on, all the geysers all over, we're talking about thousands of geysers switch on at the same time. So it creates an overload, which in turn starts creating trips. So obviously I started sending messages out for residents to put their geysers off, and then non-essentials. The idea...
So I understand where you're coming from. So, I mean, just to wrap it up, I mean, this means residents didn't have power for that long, and obviously they had to, the effects were that they had to throw away their food. Some people couldn't have their fridges operating, but are people stable now, just briefly?
Yes, people are stable, but what you find now, people without power, had a lot to do with the time down. Because while the time was down, there was a lot of vandalism, a lot of cable theft, and City Power still has to go individually to certain areas, little blocks, little streets, individual houses to reinstate power. This is still now the fallout of the actual ground zero, situation. You know, the power going out. It's a direct result of the power being out for so long.
We'll leave it there for now, Carlos. Thank you. Thank you. Mpho, you heard it there from the ward councillor, Carlos Darocha, there of Ward 66, just explaining the technicalities in terms of when the substation caught fire and the reaction by City Power ever since then. But power being restored, but the effects still being felt by the community.
Very well, Katleho, Sekhotho. Let's leave it there for now as we continue to keep a very close eye on the developments around the power outage in the Observatory area.